This is Chattanooga Civics. I'm Nathan Bird. On April 13, the City of Chattanooga will hold a runoff election for mayor, as well as the council seats for District 2 and District 5. Early voting will run from March 24th to April 8th. As part of the preparation for the runoff, I wanted to provide some more in-depth interviews with the two candidates for mayor, asking some tough questions and getting into more detail about each of the candidates' policy proposals. I hope you find this information helpful. All right, I'm here with Tim Kelly. He is running for mayor of the city of Chattanooga. He is in a runoff against Kim White on April 13th. I just want to dive right in. Tim, I've got several questions for you, ranging from kind of general questions about the campaign to more in-depth policy questions, and then some listener questions as well.
Great.
The first three questions are kind of three big issues that I've seen come up, mostly on social media, comments, and things of that nature, of just kind of big, broad picture questions people have about your campaign. Yeah. So the first is that you and Kim, at least on the surface, seem to have a lot in common. You both have backgrounds in business, you've both been very successful, and you've both become very well connected in the city. On the surface level, a lot of your policy pitches even start to sound similar. Turnout was already very low in March. It was around 25%, and I think it can be very easy for the average voter to kind of tune out in an election like this if they're not informed about the differences between the two candidates. Yeah. So why is this election important, and what are two or three of the most important differences between you and your opponent that will affect the way Chattanooga is run in the next 4 years?
Well, I'll just say, starting out, our campaigns, we're not that similar, actually. Other than race, we don't share much in common. I think it's, I think we started early on with a lot of policy. We'll talk about it, I'm sure, but I put a lot of money of my own into the race early on because I wanted us to focus on policy and building working groups of community leaders to build policy. And what's happened, very frankly, is that there's convergence here. They copied a tremendous amount of our stuff. Again, it's not something I generally talk about in the wider media because it just sounds petty, and I'm not whining about it. I think it's great that we've been able to frame the race in the way that we want.
Right.
But, I'm a policy guy. I'm not a talking head. And I feel like, again, I've been very, very intentional and very careful to keep this race civil because I think there's nothing more important to me than the civic fabric of Chattanooga, because I think Chattanooga is an extraordinary place. But, I think my opponent does not want there to be. She doesn't want people to think there's a big difference between she and I because they don't want a big turnout. Her base, which is largely Republican, again, I have support from all quarters, Republican, Democrat, and Independent. But her base, which is affiliated with a wing of one particular party, will turn out. I think it's a strategy on her side to sort of say the things that people need that she thinks people need to say to depress turnout, very frankly. So there are a lot of differences between she and I. I mean, one thing that I will say is one of the reasons that I did fund my own campaign to a great extent is because, money in politics is a horrible, pernicious thing. We all know that. There's a lot of griping about it, but it's until we somehow devise some better way to do it, it's not a question of whether there's money in politics. It's a question of whose money and why, right? And Chattanooga's got these structural problems that it's had for decades and decades and decades, and if the same old people buy the same old politicians, then we're going to get what we've always got. And
it's kind of it's a tough conversation to have. Right. And, I asked Kim this when we did our interview a week or two ago about, receiving money from the same kind of people who've been funding these elections, historically speaking. Right. But on the flip side of that is, you've raised a lot less in terms of just voluntary donations than she has. You've also spent more because you have this large self-funded campaign. And so something I hear a lot. On the last
disclosure. I mean, I think you'll see those numbers close when the next disclosure
comes
out.
Yeah, because I am working with slightly older data, but be that as it may, there's kind of a perception a lot of people that I see online saying that you're trying to buy the campaign, essentially. That the reason you're self-funding is you think you can just walk in and put down $1 million and buy the mayor's seat.
Not at all the case. I mean, again, this is not a great time to be a white male running for anything. I mean, again, it's not unprecedented either, by the way. I mean, Phil Bredesen, when he ran for mayor in Nashville, did this largely because he wanted to focus on policy. I think Corker did it one of the times he's run. It's not, I mean, locally it's not unprecedented. Nationally it's not unprecedented. And it is the only way to break the cycle. And as far as I'm concerned, I'm not, this is one of the interesting things that Monty Brule and I have talked a lot about, where he and I had more in common than Kim White and Wade Hinton. I'm not, nor was Monty, the establishment candidate. A lot of people look at me and think, oh, well, yet another white guy. But I'm not the establishment candidate. I mean, the establishment, as it were, is largely behind my opponent. I have a very broad base of support. And I will say, Kim White is an outstanding fundraiser. She's a better fundraiser than I am. There's no question about it. But I wanted to spend my time not dialing for dollars, but working on policy. We've got a much more extensive staff than she has because they're writing policy and researching policy, and that's what it's going to take to be able to hit the ground running and get Chattanooga, where it needs to be, which is what our intention is. In my fundamental thesis of the campaign is that Chattanooga has the potential to be the best city in the country. And I'm sure that it does, but it's not just going to happen if it's a business as usual sort of operation.
So you keep bringing up policy and the importance of policy to your campaign, and I do want to get to that, but I do have one last question that's kind of more broad. You have several businesses in the Chattanooga area.
Yep.
You've committed to putting these in blind trust, I believe, and I'm sure you still have a good idea of which policies will impact your bottom line. Even though they're in a blind trust, you're still going to have that in your head of, I know how businesses work, I know how regulations work. And so you see that connection.
Yep.
So how can you ensure that your business interests will not unduly influence your policy decisions? Even though they're in a blind trust, how are you going to keep those things separate? And then kind of in line with that, can you comment on your decision to move Honda Power Sports outside of the city into Eastridge?
Yeah. Look, I mean, I'm a Chattanoogan. I'm a business person. Short of selling everything I own in order to run for office, I don't know how you could avoid that and having a blind trust, which of course I will do. That's what Bob Corker did when he ran.
Right.
I mean, I do believe, so I don't have Subaru anymore, and that was one of the reasons why I thought it was best. There were a number of decisions that or a number of factors that converged in that decision. That certainly makes it one less thing to worry about. The decision to move Honda to Eastridge was based on the merits of the business for Honda and began long before I began to consider, not long, but a solid year before I began to consider running for mayor in Chattanooga. But very frankly, it's one less thing for me to worry about in terms of conflict of interest because it's not in Chattanooga. The other businesses, Chattanooga Brewing Company, Chattanooga Football Club. I mean, look, if I rely on a healthy journalistic function here, and I'm sure that they will be keeping an eye on those things. I will say relative to the beer business, if nothing else, like we need for the people that are in the craft brewing community out there, we need to start marketing Chattanooga as a craft beer city, kind of like Asheville, and get more people here and get those breweries on the same page and cooperating. If Chattanooga Brewing succeeds from that or has success, I guess that's a dividend. I don't know, but I want to see that entire industry succeed. Chattanooga Football Club, again, I'm not the sole owner of that. It's owned by the community. I am an owner. I mean, also, if you own a share of Unum stock, Unum's here. Just to some extent, this stuff is inevitable, but I expect that the community broadly and the journalistic community will hold me accountable on that stuff. And that is absolutely not, why I'm doing this. I mean, other than to say, I do want the economy to succeed, and I want the tide to rise as a whole. And if that happens, great, good for me. But I'm not a real estate developer. When Corker ran, I mean, it was much more of a direct connection where, the property values are going to rise.
Right.
And so at some level, the two can't really be separated. But again, as long as it's not, nest feathering and stuff that's wildly inappropriate, which I'm absolutely expect to be held accountable for. I don't think incentive alignment is a bad thing.
Right. So I want to move on now into kind of a deep dive into your policy proposals. I drew a lot of these questions just looking through your website, reading through your broader policy proposals, and as well as your 100-day plan.
Right.
And education is one of the biggest focuses of your campaign so far. It's something I've heard you talk about more than possibly anything else.
Yeah.
And you've stated your goal is making affordable quality pre-K available to every family in the city. As part of ensuring quality pre-K programs, you've committed to raising the minimum wage for city Head Start teachers to $15 an hour.
Mm-hmm.
Where's that funding coming from?
It'll come out of the city budget. Actually, early on, when going in, we were determined to just find the money and prioritize the money. But as fate would have it, this money that's coming down from the federal government, which is considerable, $39.8 million estimated to be coming from the federal government in terms of COVID, just in terms of COVID relief. There may be, we think, some additional money specifically for standing back up and investing in early childhood education. So between those two pots of money, you're talking about a fairly trivial amount of money so irony of ironies, Head Start teachers are actually capped. It's a federal program, and it's $11 and change an hour that federal government will reimburse for that. So we're talking about just making up the difference between $11.50 or so. Right. Maybe it's $11.23. Can't remember the exact number, and the 15. So that's not a huge amount of money.
So it's not you're not paying the full. No. The city is not paying the full increase.
Absolutely
in that
not.
salary.
Not at all.
And then you've also committed to partnering with the county to complete the launch of the Building Trades School.
Right.
What actual resources are still needed to complete this project, and what specific resources are you committing to providing? On the website, it just kind of gives general support for the program. What does that actually look like?
We met with Dr. Johnson a number of times, and the Building Trades Association on this and a number of other issues around skilled trades education. And one of the most surprising things about the campaign thus far, quite honestly, is that the city and the school system don't communicate or play. I was going to say they don't play well together. They don't play together at all. They don't collaborate at all, which is just baffling to me. So this is one of many ways in which we'll be collaborating with Dr. Johnson. We had said a couple of places we're willing to allocate up to $1 million. It's really, I think, as much about leadership and thought leadership and convening the right voices and get them there. If we need to fill the gap, we can. The county also has a part to play in this. So, again, we've said up to $1 million, and I think we would be willing to do more than that. Again, we have a gift coming from the federal government, because the fact of the matter is the design is somewhat curious in that, the COVID has been a terrible thing, but it has had a disproportionate impact in different cities and states around the country, depending on a number of different things, right? It's been a terrible thing for Chattanooga. The lives lost have been tragic, but from an economic perspective, the impact here has not been as severe as certainly as it's been in other places. And yet we're getting the federal relief just like everybody else. So my goal is to use that relief money in the long-term strategic best interests of to not put Band-Aids on problems, but to attack the source of the problems. And if we can make structural fixes related to that, then that's what we're going to do. Building trades is a great path to wealth, and it's a great piece of low-hanging fruit. And if those monies are eligible, then we'll support it. It's a little unclear as to whether they are, but if not, we can take money from the operating budget and use it there.
So you talked about not doing Band-Aid fixes, kind of trying to address the root of the issue. That actually leads us really well into our next question. You've committed to increase road maintenance funding by $3.5 million and to pave more roads in the summer of 2021 than any summer in the past 20 years. Do you think that additional maintenance is sustainable? And if it's not, how do we make that kind of maintenance sustainable so that we don't run into this problem in the future of having all these potholes? Yeah,
we need to think in terms of, sinking funds when it comes to capital improvement, right? Sock money away and make sure that we can do this on a recurring basis. Again, I think one of the pernicious problems with American politics is that short-termism. It's the same thing that haunts corporate America, right? People are worried about the next quarter's earning or the next election, and I'm not. I really am interested in the longer term fixes. Again, I'm going to lean on, I'm going to do my best to hire the very smartest, best, most experienced people in the city that we can possibly find inside the city and out, and listen to them. Again, I've been relatively successful in business, not because I am some virtuoso, but because I've gotten good at spotting talent and hiring the best people to come in and do stuff. Most people are more excited by the ability to, get things done than they are by the prospect of a paycheck alone. And I think we're going to be able to offer that to people because we can get a lot of things done at the city that a lot of people around here have been wanting to get done for a very long time. So, do I think, that $3.5 million commitment early on is critical, and we need to get caught up on a big backlog. After that, we'll create a plan that will probably stretch out at least a couple of years, and we'll back into the funding. It won't be as much on an ongoing basis as what we're putting in now, obviously. But we're committed to making sure that it's enough to keep it up, because again, I think in a way this is like we talked about this. I think the first time I came on about a hierarchy of needs, and if you're paying city taxes, I mean, again, smooth roads are kind of on that first baseline of what you expect for your money. So that will be our budgeting process will be impact-based budgeting. So what people do expect and what they feel for their tax money. And so, again, roads and paving and parking will be at the baseline of that pyramid.
So talking about, making sure that ongoing expense, we have a plan to address that and everything in terms of structural changes to not only how we maintain our roads, but how we build our roads in the first place. How is your administration to prioritize transportation issues to make sure that we can maintain that entire system sustainably, expand that system sustainably as needed, and also meet the needs of all Chattanoogans, including those who don't have cars?
Well, by thinking about it in exactly that way, right? So our org chart will really have two big grand divisions, one that's planning strategy and one that's operations and tactics, right? Sort of planners and doers. And people tend to sort themselves out along those lines. So again, I do think this is where my background in the car business and the transportation industry comes in handy, because I think implicit in your question is this recognition that we are at a really interesting point of departure for the future of transportation. And I think we have the opportunity to get it right over the next 4 to 8 years, and make sure that when we make new investments in infrastructure, that they are friendly to and anticipating the change in the nature and the modes of transportation. I think we talk a lot internally about transportation as a service. Electrification, bike lanes here have not been well utilized or well used, and part of that has to do, I think, with design and the lack of continuity. But part has to do with the fact that if you look at days where the index here, heat and humidity, are above a certain level, most people are not going to ride a bike, right? But electrification will change that. We've already seen how it will change that. And as electric bikes become cheaper and more prevalent, and scooters, et cetera, I mean, I know, in fact, that will change, particularly in the urban core, the nature and form of transportation, and our plans will anticipate that.
And then you mentioned parking as well. As you note on your website, there's been a number of studies already devoted to Chattanooga's parking problem, quote unquote. The latest study concluded that only about 50% of the city's parking resources are utilized at any given time. This is a study by the River City Company back in, I think, 2017. It also noted that most of the parking is privately owned or privately managed. And it's obviously going to take time and negotiation to bring those private partners on the table and come up with any kind of comprehensive parking plan. And I'm sure that's something that, looking at your website, that seems like something you're eyeing. But in the meantime, what specific improvements can you commit to making to the city's parking that the city owns and manages? Something that, citizens will be able to see early on in your administration.
Okay, this is an easy one. But let me back up. While I was on the board of River City when we did that parking study, and we did it because I raised hell about the fact that we didn't have a comprehensive parking strategy, and we needed more information about it. It's one of the major, talking about differences between Kim White and I. Kim, when she was executive director on the board, just wouldn't flat out even recognize that there was a problem with parking. And that that study, and again, we spent $200,000 to learn essentially what we already knew. Didn't get us anywhere. Didn't change anything about the strategic approach to the problem, which is a problem that Chattanooga's had. We don't need to spend money, hundreds of thousands of dollars for studies to tell us what we already know. But there are some really simple things, to your point, that we can do right now before we embark on real structural change. One of the simplest is park mobile. Everybody below a certain age uses a park mobile to park, and including me. And if next time you do, you can look at it and see that there's a little spot to enter a code, a promo code. And if so that a downtown merchant, if you go in and spend $20 or whatever it is, you could decide can you give you a code and pay for your parking. We don't even have the functionality turned on. It's not even turned on. And that is because of just a pure lack of recognition that there is a problem. Locals, and it's a huge problem, right? I mean, locals avoid downtown, particularly from outlying suburbs, because our parking market is essentially geared, and there's a thing in economics called the ratchet effect. Prices tend to go up but not come down. Tourism drives up the market for parking. What did I just say? The market for parking to the point where locals don't want to fool with it. So some of it's cost, some of it's convenience. And if we're not real careful, downtown below 5th Street is going to become Gatlinburg. And so we have to figure out a way to get locals back downtown. My opponent has never even acknowledged that it's a problem. It is a huge problem. And again, turning on that functionality within Park Mobile can be done in the first week of my administration. Local merchants can say, yeah, come in and have lunch, and here's a code for parking, and now you're on an equal footing with amigos on Dayton Boulevard, where people can just get out in a suburban market like this, when you can be in Red Bank or Hickson in 5 minutes and park in a big parking lot and walk in. You're at a distinct disadvantage downtown. We have to level the playing field, and we can do that with parking. So beyond that, I would love to see, which would take a little bit more time. As you say, the lots are owned by a lot of different private providers. Most of them, however, are administered by Republic Parking, and I think that there's a lot more we can do to bring Republic to bear, to play ball and say perhaps give locals an hour of free parking downtown. The whole Park Mobile system works off your 6-digit Tennessee license plate number. It's very simple. So we already know what your license plate number is if you're a city resident. Right. It's already in the system. It's theoretically possible that you could just pull up and park downtown and walk off and have an hour of free parking if you're local. And so that's what we're going to be, trying to devise as a system, again, to make it much easier and cheaper for locals to park downtown.
So then the next bit, sticking with this kind of transportation-oriented subject, you've committed to making main bus routes free for all riders by, quote, increasing non-fare revenue, unquote. Where does that non-fare revenue come from, and how does the city increase it?
Yeah, so at CARTA, non-fare revenue includes parking, which, again, they're not going to get much help there. Although in some cases, I will say, parking rates, Monty Brule pointed this out, parking rates in some cases are too cheap in some areas. So it's a question of getting the market exactly right. I'm not going to walk in there and say I'm going to make parking more expensive overnight. If anything, I think the city CARTA has leaned too heavily on parking to fill gaps, and without understanding that there's this elasticity that affects downtown business. And, so it's kind of a long game, right? But if more people come downtown, spend money, we get that back through sales tax revenues. The short answer to your question is sponsorships, honestly. I mean, if you go to New York City and ride the subway, they generate a lot of money from sponsorships, and the more people ride the bus, which again, it's an elasticity issue, the more eyeballs you have, the more you can charge for that. Right, precisely.
That makes sense.
That's the short answer.
So I want to move on and talk about affordable housing. You commit to developing a strategic framework for affordable housing, and you also set a goal to create 100 new units by the end of 2021. Yeah. However, beyond that date, there are very few tangible goals listed on your website right now. Yep. What is your long-term goal with regard to the long-term availability of affordable housing? You mentioned a review of our development regulations and zoning codes to encourage that kind of thing. do you have any particular code changes in mind that you'd actively be asking the city council to adopt?
A lot to unpack in there, but I'll work backwards. Code reform is going to be really important, and I'm going to have somebody in charge of essentially looking at code reform from top to bottom over the course of my entire administration and revising things. Codes, as it stands with builders, are not the issue as much as one of two things. What really needs to happen with code and ordinance almost immediately as regards building is fines need to go up, because what happens right now is you've got a couple of lousy builders that will just go in and do whatever they want and go ahead, fine me, I don't care. Seriously. I mean, it's ridiculous. So that needs to happen. And then secondly, we just need to get off a dead center. Like 9 times out of 10, they just need to know an answer. And things get hung up in the LDO and the Land Development Office or in the Department of Transportation for months and months and months and months and months and months. And so it's a question of just getting stuff through so that they can, because time is money when it comes to business. And it's just getting things, yes or no, but it's just getting things processed and done in a much more common sense way. So that's a big part of it, because we do have to make it easier for people to build here and invest in the city, because ultimately affordable housing is a supply and demand problem. We've got to have more housing, and the regulation is, we've got to keep our regulatory goals and guidelines in order. I'm not going to deregulate the system just to throw the door open, but it's just got to be more predictable, I guess would be the way I would look at it. We have to increase the supply, however. As far as innovative vehicles, I'm a huge fan. Caleb, some people may be familiar with Caleb, a local activist organization, is advocating for a community land trust here. And I think it's a fantastic idea. And it might be the closest thing to a silver bullet that I've heard to take advantage of Chattanooga's long history of public-private partnership. If we can raise $5 or $10 million, what they can do is buy property, right? You could even reverse mortgage and sell existing homeowners, sell to it, lease back on a 99-year lease. The land trust holds the property, and then you can, if you sell the property, you are on an equity split essentially with them, where if you did it really early on, you wouldn't get much of the return. The longer you hold it, the more you would get. But the land trust holds the property, and then can make sure that both subsidize down payments and other ways to make sure that it's affordable, and then make sure that it's not out of town speculators just coming in and buying up land to flip it. So it's a fantastic idea. I mean, that's one thing I am willing to put my feet completely and utterly on the ground. We're going to make that happen if I get in there, and it's a question of how well we can fund it. I will also say, which may or may not work with the land trust idea specifically, Chattanooga is blessed with some huge local foundations that have large endowments, and the typical philanthropic model, of course, is you have this big piggy bank of endowment money, you invest it, you get back the returns, and then you sprinkle around a percentage of the returns as philanthropy. But the notion of impact investment or mission-related direct investment is actually taking money from the endowment that you might invest in a municipal bond or some other equity investment, by the way, most of which are outside of Chattanooga, right? They're buying up 1,000 shares of Microsoft. Well, how's that money coming back to Chattanooga, right? But if they were to invest in a affordable housing project and accept a lower rate of return, it's still a perfectly low risk investment. It's in a fixed asset in the form of real estate. It's mission related. I mean, it's going towards solving a problem that they want to help solve. And so it's a great example of killing multiple birds with one stone. And that investment can be leveraged and matched by outside investment and public investment. So those would be the main ways I would address it.
And just for our listeners, I'll link the Caleb Land Trust study in our show notes.
Read it and get excited about it, because it's going to happen.
I read it a while back. Yeah. It's very interesting.
Yeah.
So you also mentioned the implementation of a housing choice voucher incentive program. Do you have a specific idea of what that program would look like, and also how its success would be measured?
That one I'm less. I mean, that's been used elsewhere around the country, and it's a good idea because it again it allows the market to sort of fill in where needed. It uses the market itself to sort of direct the.
And I guess let me back up and just clarify as well. This is a voucher incentive program to incentivize renters or I guess landlords to rent to Section 8 recipients. Is that correct? Okay,
precisely.
Great. Just
That's
for
right.
everybody to be on the same page.
Yeah, I don't have a heck of a lot to add on that one because it's been done elsewhere. We know that it works, but we are going to be looking for ways to, I mean, again, it's a huge part of our problem with homelessness and affordable housing. Those two, intersect at the bottom edge, and I'm sure we'll talk about homelessness at some point. But yeah, I mean, look, we're a fan of that. That program exists now, and so we would, we'll be looking to expand it. I should also say, though, we're also going to be looking at really creative ways to convert renters to owners in ways that we might incentivize landlords to sell to their renters. I mean, the rate of home ownership in the African American community here is 37% versus 62% for the white community. That's part of the reason we had this gap in net worth between black and white. And again, we've got to really aggressively attack the problem of upward mobility here and start to close these gaps. And that's one primary.
And that's, I mean, just from my own reading, that's a big factor in gentrification as well.
No
if
doubt.
you don't have that local control, then it becomes much easier for somebody to push you out of your neighborhood.
Absolutely
if you're a renter,
right.
You raise the rates, you're pushed out. If you're an owner, you get to stick there.
We will be looking for a number of ways to combat absentee landlordism, God knows slumlordism.
Right. I was going to bring that up as this housing choice voucher incentive that is kind of a risk there in terms of you give this incentive to landlords and then they say, great, free money. And then they just never take care of the property, and then
that's right. And that's where codes and enforcement comes in. We need to do a better job there, for sure, and making sure that if a landlord is not holding up their end of the bargain, that there are real penalties involved.
Right. So I want to move on to economic development. Your economic development plan has a strong focus on education to improve opportunity for citizens and also to provide quality hires for companies that are interested in the Chattanooga market. Yeah. You also mentioned the use of financial incentives, saying that, quote, Chattanooga must move away from blanket spending and instead approach the use of financial incentives in a more targeted and intentional way, unquote. Yeah. There have been several deals in the past in which the incentives offered were either not really justified by the benefit that the company was receiving or, the terms of the agreement were not properly enforced. So the company agreed to do something to receive this incentive and then they didn't hold up their end of the bargain. Right. They kept receiving that incentive.
Right.
How will your administration ensure that financial incentives are targeted but also transparent and accountable to taxpayers?
Well, this is a place where I think my business experience really comes in handy, and my knowledge of finance and negotiations, very frankly. Again, I think this is what happens when you put politicians, who inevitably are involved in economic development, and they should be, they must be, but they get beat like a drum at their own game by the business people who do it for a living and probably are laughing up their sleeve the whole time. You're right. We have a terrible track record here of enforcing clawbacks, which is the consequences that happen. If you don't live up to your end of the bargain. We just did one. I think they just enforced the first one in probably 15, 20 years here, and it's absurd, right? I mean, Helen Burns Sharp is a big fan of mine, and that has accountability, ATM. I can't remember exactly what it is. Accountability for Taxpayer Money. I think that's what it stands for. And she and I have talked extensively about this, and again, the real focal point of the whole theory behind it is the but-for rule, right? Which is but for the public incentive, would the project have happened anyway? And it's not always entirely clear cut, but I think it takes somebody with a business background that isn't bought and paid for by developers to be able to look at it and take and really balance all the interests and make a clear-headed, clear-eyed decision about what the level of incentive should be, and then again, hold them accountable. If they don't create the jobs or don't do what they're supposed to do, then there have to be consequences. I think part of the problem that gets lost in the conversation a lot is that Chattanooga was whatever the opposite of the belle of the ball is. That's what we've been for a long time. And so a lot of times we would be, gosh, there's an old joke about, a kid so ugly that you have to tie a pork chop around his neck to get the dog to play with it. Like that was Chattanooga, right? And so we just had to throw incentives at companies to get them to come here. And then it was like, we're just glad you're here. And as I think Chattanooga begins to get its mojo back, right, and begins to get genuine grassroots momentum in terms of economic development, that sort of things becomes less and less necessary.
Right.
And we can actually pick our battles and pick our partners, and we have to hold them accountable, and I certainly would.
Right.
And I should also say that, because it's an important part of our platform, and it's a big difference between Kim White and I. We've said that if we do public finance pilots and tests, which we will do, I'm sure we will. We need to do them. We have to be competitive. It's a pari-mutuel game, right?
Right.
We're competing against Alabama and Georgia, and there may be things where we have to do things we wouldn't otherwise do. But if we don't, they're going to get them. Now,
Right.
There is such a thing in economics as the winner's curse. There's some deals you want to lose, right? Because if you're the high bidder, you almost certainly paid too much.
Right.
So again, this is where business background comes in handy. But if we do them, at a minimum, being a localist, we will make sure that whenever possible, local labor and local contractors are used to do the work. Because this is just basically the economics of localism. Why on earth would we spend millions of dollars in taxpayer incentive money in foregone property taxes to let a contractor from Charlotte or Atlanta come in here and do the work? It makes no sense. So Nashville recently adopted a community benefit agreement, which is essentially this codified, and we would do something very similar. There may be times when there isn't a local contractor available, to do a certain type of specialized work, but
Right.
whenever possible, we would make sure that local labor gets the first crack at it.
Great. So I want to move on to our next topic, which is public safety. If elected, you'll be presenting a budget to the City Council in June. Will you change funding for police significantly, or will the allocation of funds within the police department change significantly?
Well, I can tell you, I'm not a defund the police guy. I mean, I do think that's back to that baseline of city services. I listened. I spent a lot of time out there listening, not grandstanding, but listening around the peaceful protests this summer. I was out there alongside a lot of folks, again, just trying to get my mind around what was happening. I did a lot of reading around the subject, and I was surprised to learn at the time, this would have been in July, that one of the big initiatives around police reform is called 8 Can't Wait. And the Chattanooga Police Department, prior to George Floyd's tragic death, had 7 of them just about knocked out. So this idea, I think a lot of times people don't realize how forward-thinking the Chattanooga Police Department is, particularly relative to their counterparts of the county. David Roddy has done a good job, but he needs more support from the mayor's office. He has not had that, very frankly. And so I look forward to working with him. I do not see cutting their budget. Do I see, however, reallocating some of that with their help? I'm not going to hand down, I don't know anything about public safety other than what I've read. I'm not going to try to, micromanage any department, let alone the police department. But I will say, we've got significant gaps in terms of minority representation in the department. I was pleased to see that the new cadet class coming in actually looked like the community. Great progress, and I think Chief Roddy is committed to continuing that progress, which is great because that has to continue. And I'm a big fan of the community policing model that Fred Fletcher brought here, and would continue on that path with them. So, look, if we can shift budget so that we have a community response team to handle non-emergency calls, that would be fantastic. I mean, I think we all agree that an armed officer is not the best response to every situation.
Right.
And so, again, I'm going to do that, with their help, because I think the police department, while certainly, I mean, like any organization or any department around the country, are there areas for improvement? Absolutely. But I think they're largely on the right track, and I look forward to working with them to continue on the path they're already on.
Right. And also in the realm of public safety, you've previously stated you would retain Chief Roddy. Originally, this was going to be a really simple like yes or no question. Is that still the case? And then this whole kerfuffle came up in the paper where something broke where you would maybe be replacing him, and then you said you wouldn't be. And can you just speak to, you still are on the record as saying you're going to retain Chief Roddy.
Yeah.
Can you explain kind of what happened there for listeners in terms of how that misunderstanding arose? Do you have any idea what happened?
Well, I think
there?
it's a combination of lousy whisper campaign politics by a camp that wants to, portray me as weak on public safety. Again, my opponent was endorsed by the police union. I was not. But no, there's nothing. Again, I'm not responsible for rumors.
Right.
I mean, I've had conversations about minority representation in the department, and yes, that needs to increase. But that's it. So there's nothing more to it than that. Just people talking. And, it's kind of a when did you stop beating your wife sort of thing. It's a terrible...
it's a hard question to answer around. In terms
it's not a question.
How,
really simple.
How did that happen? What happened?
Yeah, like how the hell do I know?
Right.
People are out there talking, and rumors are rumors. But no, I'm going to keep Chief Roddy, provided that we stay on the path towards community policing that we're on. And provided he wants to stay. And provided we meet our goals with continuing to mend fences between the community and the department, there's nothing to it other than people talking about what they would probably like to see happen. And again, I talk to everybody, right? I'll meet with anybody. I've met with very controversial figures across the community, and I always will. I'm a Chattanoogan first and foremost. I'm not going to not talk to people. And those people have widely varying ranges of opinions about things. Doesn't mean they're my opinions. I'm a listener. That's what good leaders do. So I can't explain, and nor would I attempt to rumor and innuendo. That's beyond my control.
So moving on, you have a goal on your website to, quote, establish policies and revise codes to decriminalize poverty, unquote.
Yep.
What are the specific codes that you have in mind, these regulations that are quote unquote criminalizing poverty?
Well,
what's going to change?
There's nothing that I could tell you very specific around that other than the idea we would go back and look at, we shouldn't be, the nightmare scenario is you put somebody in jail for accumulated parking tickets, which they can't pay. They can't make bail. And then they, try to escape or get in a fight, and then they have another charge, and then pretty soon you've got this downward spiral where, in essence, you've taken an economic crime and turned it into a criminal. You've literally made somebody into a criminal, and so that's the point at which the conversation starts with us. If a guy's got a broken taillight, that he can't afford to fix, and you're pulling him over and beginning this downward spiral, we need to stop that. And so if the city is engaged in activities that are really economic in nature, like handing out speeding tickets, that is public safety, to be fair. But if there's anywhere where it's really about economics and less about public safety, we need to be mindful of that and thoughtful of that and make sure the city is not sort of turning a blind eye just to preserve a revenue stream. That's part of it. Bail reform is part of this as well. So it's less at this point any specific idea for code reform as much as it is an approach to make sure that we're not pushing people into the criminal justice system and ruining lives for economic reasons.
Mm-hmm. So I want to circle back around. We brought up homelessness briefly a while back. Your section on homelessness makes a commitment to improving coordination between existing organizations fighting homelessness, and also indicates you'll shift the city to a housing first model rather than a treatment first model. Are you willing to commit any new funding or a new number of temporary permanent shelter beds or some other tangible improvement to implement this new model? What is this model actually going to look like?
Well, again, this is one of those places where the federal relief money coming in both to the state and the county could be a godsend. Because I had coffee with a friend this morning, and he's been out of town for a year and came back, and he said, and I imagine having been gone that long and come back, I've been here the entire time, and I've seen it grow alarmingly, and having left and come back, he said it's just shocking the level to which it's grown. It's a huge problem. It's an epidemic problem. And again, I think we will now have the resources. And I would modify, yes, ours is a housing first model, but I think what we need, I know what we need, is a low barrier shelter with a co-located resource hub so that it's both housing first and treatment first. You've got treatment and housing together. We need to make that happen. We have a large and organized veterans community here that wants to be part of making that happen. Again, I've had pledges from friends in the private community that are willing to commit resources to make that happen. And now we are going to have resources from the federal government to also help that happen. And I talked to a county commissioner the other day that said, look, the county and the city should play together on this, because this is not just a city of Chattanooga issue. It's one of those areas where, again, it's going to require leadership and urgency to get the people together and move on it and get rolling, right? And which has not been the case. And but that is going to be at the very top of my list of things to do when I get in there.
And this is the last kind of policy-specific question before we move into some listener questions. It's about effective government. You propose a number of changes to government organization, including a new performance management system for city employees, a website redesign, a new policy director for code reform, and a new legislative analyst for city council. Can you tell me more about that legislative analyst position, how it'll help citizens, and how that analyst will be held accountable to acting in the public interest?
Yeah, so let me start with the first part of that. I think, we'll go in that order. The legislative, we used to have a position like this at city council, and apparently the person, and I have no idea who it is or who he or she was. My history doesn't extend that far back, but it didn't work for whatever reason. But I think it was more about the person than the position. We think it's important so that we don't have certain members of the council sort of leading the other ones around by their expertise in one area of policy or lack thereof, right? So having that person who works, at the behest of the council is going to be really important. And that, to be able to analyze not only in terms of the budget impact, but just the general policy impact is going to be great for them to help them make good decisions about the policy. But it's also for the public, right? Because in doing the analysis for the council, they've also done it for the public. It would be a public document. And again, I would go to city council meetings and we could actually have these discussions around these things. So it goes back to my general commitment to transparency, really. I mean, again, if it's a good idea, it should be, aired in the light of day, and we should talk it out and decide what the best approach is. Because
the one thing that I kind of raises my interest in a position like this is the idea that, this could be used not so much in the public interest, but to kind of ease people through policy proposals that maybe the administration wants, but might not be in the public interest.
This person wouldn't work for us. This person will work for the council.
Okay.
It's not me sending down, somebody to work for them. This position would work at the pleasure of the council. What was the first part of that question?
It was just kind of a walkthrough of your effective government section.
I was just going to say, I don't get a chance to talk about it much on the campaign trail because there's not many votes in IT. There may be some out there listening, but I'm a IT guy, and I'd say all the time, good IT is where strategy and execution sort of come together to get things done. And so, unsexy, yes, not a big campaign issue, but we will be looking very hard at OpMod, and I've had some great discussions with folks over there already about how we can use data to better guide decisions, and where appropriate, combine systems, simplify systems, and replace systems with better systems to make the city work better and to get us to better decisions faster. And that's about IT. So we'll be doing a lot of IT work at the city as well.
And then I've got a broader question that addresses effective government, essentially. More broadly speaking, are you going to be actively pushing for any more fundamental changes to the organization of city government? This is something that would have to happen probably at the charter level. but something like the change to a full-time city council, a city manager style government, or anything along those lines. Is that something you're going to be pushing for, or is that
I can't. We as we've it should be obvious to the casual observer at this point, we are going to have our hands absolutely full, and that's good. I mean, I look forward to getting a lot of stuff done. That said, it was actually my friend Helen Burns Sharp who pointed out, a very, very smart lady who's done a lot of homework on this, who pointed out that somebody has done the math, and the fact is, long-term, cities with a strong council and a weaker mayor and a city manager, that model, which Greenville, South Carolina has, Charleston, South Carolina has, a lot of cities have a better long-term success rate. They have less fluctuation than cities with models like ours, which is a strong mayor model. That's for the dear listener out there. That's why this election matters so much. Obviously, I think I'm the best person for this job, and I'm up for the job, or I wouldn't be running. The person who holds the mayor's seat in Chattanooga holds a lot of influence, and if they do a good job and they're engaged, then it's great for Chattanooga. If they don't and they're disengaged or they're bad or worse, then it's very, very bad for Chattanooga. And that's why Chattanooga tends to have these kind of boom-bust cycles. Right. So short answer is, once we get past the initial backlog of heavy work, I would be wide, because I don't have future political ambition, because I'm not party affiliated, and I'm not trying to protect a stream of patronage on either side of me. I'd be perfectly willing to entertain a change in the model to a city manager, strong council, weaker mayor model, because I do think I'm interested in anything that is demonstrably going to stabilize and ensure the long-term future of this community. So I can't say right now that I'm convinced that's the case, but I'm wide open to the conversation.
Great. So I want to move on. We've got maybe 10, 15 minutes to talk about some listener questions. And we're just going to run through these, spend as much or as little time on these as you would like. But the first one is pretty straightforward. Do you plan on proposing higher property taxes or instituting any new property reassessments? No, I don't plan on doing anything like that. I'm not, again, being a small business owner, I'm used to dealing with really tight budgets in a very aggressive way. So I'm not a reflexive tax and spend person, because I didn't come out of government where you just spend every dime that you raise and then you go looking for more. I mean, that's just not the way I'm wired. Right. That being said, we are seeing rising property taxes. The way state law is written, you have to drop the rate to make sure that that's neutral. What local municipalities generally do is tick it up just a little bit. I can't say that I will do that or won't do that. I'm for, we need to make sure that we've got the money to pursue our strategic goals. But I do not, I have nowhere in my plans have I penciled in a tax increase to meet those goals. And then kind of along those lines, annexation is often used as a way to kind of get a short-term infusion of new taxable property. Do you have any plans around annexation, one way or the other? No, I've been asked about it a number of times. I will hold the municipalities, I won't name them, but I've had a few residents say, well, again, that municipality has to decide to do it. And Chattanooga is this crazy piece of Swiss cheese when it comes to that, right? So if it makes sense, we're open to conversation about it. I will say, coming from retail business, I think my job as the mayor would be to make being a citizen of Chattanooga such a great value proposition that people would want to be in the city. I would never want, it wouldn't be kind of a game of risk as far as I'm concerned. I mean, the board game, not metaphorically speaking. I'm not trying to go out there and take a shortcut by suddenly capturing a municipality and raking in all that tax money. But if there were a municipality that said, hey, we want to talk about that because you've got a better value proposition as a municipality, then certainly I'm open to it. But it's not on our agenda, above or below the line. I mean, nowhere have we talked about it. Right. Next question is about just the election itself. Runoff elections for the mayor's seat are really not uncommon historically. Turnout is also consistently low. I don't think it's broken above 35% in my lifetime. Rarely, lately, it's been kind of hovering around 20 with the exception of this last cycle. What can the city do to improve turnout? And do you support any systemic changes to how the city elections are run to improve turnout?
Yeah, that's a great question. Again, I feel like we were talking about before the podcast started. A missionary in the wilderness, a lot of times preaching the gospel of localism and trying to make people understand that local elections are as or more important than state or national elections. But we have a lot of people, arguably most people in this country, who are sort of hypnotized by this drumbeat of national media, and they're missing the point, right? I mean, the quality of life in any place is determined by the local politics of that place. It's the premise of your podcast, essentially. So other than just good old word of mouth, I mean, I will say I've talked to the media locally and kind of given them this, tried to shame them as much as I could. Seriously, because, I mean, last election day, I'm watching the news, and, I mean, anywhere I go, I look at the weather broadcast to kind of get a grip on what a place is like. What map do they show you when they show the weather, right? What do they talk about? How do they talk about it? And if you look at the calendar, they always have like the 7-day forecast up there. And if it's St. Patrick's Day, they've got the little leprechaun dancing, on St. Patrick's Day. Election day here, there's not even a bug on the screen reminding people it's election day. They opened the broadcast talking about it for 30 seconds, and that was it. That, to me, is madness. It is crazy. They ought to be talking about it all day, every day. And I've talked to every media outlet I can. Again, being a localist, I think this is, you can expect me to talk more and more and more about it, because I just think we got to keep talking about it until we turn the damn light bulb on with people, because it's not a hard one to turn on. And when you turn it on, it doesn't go off. But we, again, have been so distracted and so hypnotized by this kind of false Orwellian dualism, which ironically is generally just there to sell soap. It's just there to make us hate each other on a national level so that ratings go up, so they get more for their ads. It's all just so gross. I'm going to talk about it until I'm blue in the face.
And this is one of the few points I really try and keep my own personal opinions out of these interviews as much as possible, because it's not, the Nathan Bird Show. It's Chattanooga Civics. But this is one thing, like you said, this is the foundation of this podcast. Everybody who's listening, go vote. Please go vote.
Absolutely. And I will say, I think the having an election in March versus November, you get a lot of people saying we would increase turnout in theory if we did it in November, but local issues would probably get subsumed in the national debates, and they would just become as divisive as the national elections have gotten. So I like the fact that they're in March. And I will say, again, to all the malfunctions and ugliness around American democracy that we've seen in the last 4 years, in the last year in particular, I think that local elections are the green shoots of local nonpartisan elections, is where healthy democracy gets reborn. But you have to be able to get people to snap out of that hypnotic trance and understand the fundamental elements of localism. So hopefully everybody out there listening will understand that.
And then this next question actually falls into localism pretty well. The state has preempted local action on a number of issues, including, just kind of in my own research, minimum wage, plastic bag taxes, and gun control are kind of big three that come up pretty often in terms of the city wants to do one thing and the state says, no, you cannot do that. How do you think Chattanooga should handle preemption, generally speaking? I know that's a really broad question because it's going to vary depending on the issue.
I think we should fight it tooth and nail, period, across the board. I mean, if Chattanoogans decide that we should all wear purple hats on Thursdays, then by God, that's what we ought to be able to do if that's what we want to do as a community. Chattanooga's always functioned like its own little animal, its own little city-state. Nashville is definitely not our friend. I mean, they serve that their grand division of the state, and always have in their own interests largely. Memphis has the same problem, being stuck out there on the fringe by themselves. Atlanta, God knows, doesn't even pretend to be our friend. I mean, they're in a different state. And we are like a little Sparta. We're all stuck here on this island by ourselves, and the cavalry ain't coming. So that's where, if it's going to happen, it's up to us. And at the very least, we ought to have self-determination. I mean, we have a home rule charter, and it's just deeply bizarre and offensive that the state thinks that they get to decide what happens in every corner of the state. Ironically, this is one of those, or maybe it's not ironic, but this is one of those places where liberals and conservatives often converge, because one of the most, and localism is, I should say, broadly speaking, gosh, it used to be called Bali, and now it's called, I can't remember, Common Good or Common Purpose. But, it's a very Oakland, California, lefty, liberal, in some ways, organization, but it's all about localism. But self-determination is also one of the most core, foundational conservative principles. Mm-hmm. So that's where, coming out of this, legislative group in Nashville, I find it to be particularly odious and confusing. Because yes, I would fight local preemption. We ought to be able to put it to the voters in Chattanooga in any given question and do as we like down here.
And then the next question is climate change, environmental policy. As listener asked, how important are climate change and environmental policy to the environmental issues to the city? How important are they? And what goals should the city have with regard to climate change and environmental protection? How are you going to pursue those goals as mayor?
Yeah, so look, sustainability is in our DNA. Our core, in the micro and the macro, the essence of what Chattanooga is really about green spaces and about our incredible natural setting and natural environment. I spent most of Friday with friends from the Trust for Public Land and with the folks trying to build Walden Ridge Park. And I promise I'll get to the core of the question. But again, so part of this has to do with recreation. But again, in the big things, it also has to do with climate change and with policies that support, environmentally friendly policies, right? And so if you go to the website, the very first, kellyforcha.com, the very first policy that we did of all the 12 that we wound up doing, which were not easy to do. I mean, we had to get groups together and hash through documents and, have multiple meetings. The very first one we did is on sustainability. So you can see our specific goals and targets there at kellyforcha.com. But yes, we have very specific targets and goals for the city. And I should say, I also think, the crux of our economic opportunity is around the industry of sustainability, right? I mean, with VW becoming, they're becoming an electric car maker on the scale of Tesla, most of which will happen right here in Chattanooga, at least in the United States, and EPB being here, and TVA being here, and Oak Ridge National Labs up the road. I think much of our opportunity from the Chamber of Commerce perspective in terms of attracting new companies and jobs is going to be around sustainability. So that I think is our it's our economic future. It's our cultural future. It's really what Chattanooga needs to sharpen up as in terms of the way we think about ourselves.
Great. So the next listener asked a question. Planned Parenthood has posted 2 job openings in Chattanooga, which may indicate interest in opening a clinic. There's debate on that topic. As mayor, would you support Planned Parenthood coming back to the Chattanooga area?
Well, look, I mean, again, I try to focus on what I can control and what we can control at the city. We looked into this a little bit because we heard rumors about it, and there were a lot of strong feelings on both sides of that issue. We don't believe that they're going to build anything here. I think they just want representatives in different cities around the state. And, the city can't deny whether we wanted to or not, business licenses to people or keep people out. So this is one where, these questions come up a lot of times on national constitutional issues, and the city's got nothing to say about it, honestly. I will say I am, in essence, a civil libertarian. I don't think I worry about what we can control, but I mean, it's just not something that the city is going to, get involved with one way or the other. It's not appropriate at the city level, and so I ain't going to worry about it.
All right. And then, actually, you've already addressed this one a little bit, but if you want to, I'll give you a chance to talk a little bit more about it if you'd like. One listener asked pretty directly, have you given much thought to cybersecurity, IT, and the use of technology and data to improve government function, efficiency, and transparency?
Yes, I've thought a tremendous amount about it, and that is an area because doesn't get a lot of play or traction, but one of my companies actually is a social media marketing company, and I work with developers and engineers and have for many, many years, and I understand the critical value, transformative value, of thoughtful IT deployment. And so, yes, we will be looking at that at the city as a way to increase efficiency and productivity, and make it easier for citizens to do business with the city.
And then this one last question. This is my own personal question. What are 2 or 3 books that you've read that that have influenced the way you're campaigning and the way that you're going to govern?
Well, again, the first one I would say is The New Localism by Bruce Katz. Hugely important, very, very, very transformative in the way that I thought about things. Just a fantastic book and a sort of a roadmap, the thesis of which is that, localism is really the antidote to the divisive populism that has torn our country apart. The other part of it is that cities, because of innovations in finance and other things, have more power now to control the quality of life of their citizens than they've ever had. So it might as well have been written about Chattanooga. In fact, Chattanooga is mentioned in the book, and so that's a huge one. Secondly, I'd say The New Geography of Jobs by a guy named Enrico Moretti, who is a economist out at Berkeley. And for those people that are looking for an ideological bent there's not one. But Moretti's thesis is that the nature of work is fundamentally changing, which we all know, right? To be more intellectual. Robert Reich talked about this years ago in the Work of Nations, another great book. And that work tends to aggregate in places where the network effect is stronger. So you get these beehives in larger cities, like obviously New York and LA are a classic example, Chicago, but also Atlanta and also Nashville. So there's a scale line on one side of which jobs and talent have been aggregating at this ever increasing pace, and we are just on the other side of that line. Now this was pre-COVID, and sort of COVID might have shifted the balance back more in our favor. But Moretti's thesis is essentially that that if economic development is about a battle for talent and capital, and you think those things are sort of chicken and the egg, you can't tell which one came first. He actually says talent comes first, and that's where Chattanooga has such a huge opportunity. If we can market our quality of life to attract really talented people, make gig workers that can do anything they want, then capital investment will follow it, and we'll see new business formation, and we'll see some really great entrepreneurship here if he's right, and I think he is. So that's the second one. Third, and I'll stop there. I could definitely start a campaign book club. Is one that just got published by a guy named Mitch Weiss at Harvard Business School, called We the Possibility, and it's about public entrepreneurship. And Mitch is one of the guys that actually is an instructor and leader up at a program called the Young American Leaders Program at Harvard. And you have cohorts from all over the country from different cities. And Chattanooga is one of them. That sends a cohort up there every year. We were selected for that because Chattanooga is an extraordinary city. If anybody listening gets a chance to do it, you absolutely should do it. Chattanooga is by far the smallest city represented, but it's a great forum on what makes a city extraordinary and how public-private partnerships can work to move the needle on critical issues in cities. So Mitch is one of the instructors there, and the book he wrote is essentially about flipping the bureaucratic model over, and instead of what he calls probability government, which is same old, we do this, because we do it this way because the way it's always been done, and because it's predictably effective to the second standard deviation or something. He says, again, I'm very familiar with this, right? Being an entrepreneur, that we need to flip that model upside down and take risks in public policy, measured risks, risks that don't put the whole enterprise in peril if they fail, to innovate, the provision of service to the public. And I'm about halfway through that one. I haven't finished it yet, but it's a great book and it's a really great premise. And it is the way that I would govern, is really with the spirit of public entrepreneurship.
Great. Well, that's all I've got. Do you want to plug your social media and website and all that before we go?
Website is kellyforcha.com, kellyforcha.com. Social media is, I think it's at kellyforcha. Generally speaking, if you find it at this point, if you're paying attention, you've probably already seen it or seen an ad. And again, as I would, we began by saying, please go vote. I mean, this election will very, very much come down to turnout. And if you like what you've heard from me, trust me, my opponent is counting on the fact that people won't turn up to vote, and that the usual suspects will. So by all means, get out and vote. It matters a lot. And the future of this city very much hangs in the balance.
Early voting's already started, runs through April 18th with the exception of this Friday, or April 8th.
Is it 8th?
I believe it's April 8th.
Okay. And then
Sorry,
full-on election
the actual
days.
election is April 13th. I
Right.
got mixed up there.
That's okay.
So early voting runs through April 8th with the exception of Good Friday, which is next Friday.
Yeah.
And
early
like
voting
you
is
said, go out
really,
and vote.
really, really fast. You can do it at Brainerd. You can do it at Hickson. You can do it at the Election Commission on Amicola. And it's, again, even on Saturday at Brainerd, people were in and out in 5 minutes. So it takes no time. Make a plan. Go vote.
Great. Well, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Nathan.
You have a good one.
Yeah, you too.
I hope you've enjoyed this episode of Chattanooga Civics. Our music was written and recorded by Kevin MacLeod. If you have any questions or feedback, please send me an email at chattanoogacivics@gmail.com. You can follow me on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram @chatcivics, or visit the website chattanoogacivics.com. Thanks for listening.